Thank you, Naomi and panel. So we're going to move on in a second to our last panel session of the day. And the excellent topic and excellent panelists alone should be draw enough for you. But the further reward for those of you staying is the drinks reception afterwards. We'll get onto that in a moment. But first, I was teed up earlier just before lunch to mention our New Futures programme. This is something we've been running for the last few years, supported by the COVID-19 Support Fund, and it was running 4 pilots across the UK nations to test different ways of helping people to change careers, a really big challenge in the years ahead. So we've now come to the end of those pilots, and we just wanted to share a really short film just giving a case study of one of those pilots. So let's watch that film.
Tees Valley New Futures wanted to test out a model that would support adults to change careers. It wanted to look at how we delivered intensive wraparound support to individual people looking for a new career. We chose to work with Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council and their established training and employment hub due to their consistent track record in working with individuals who looked for work.
With career changes, it was all about talking to them about how they could transfer their skills. So by sort of getting their CV and talking to them about their transferable skills, how it could be linked into different industries, then meant that they could sort of see the wider context of what they could get into. That one-to-one approach that we adopted with the clients that they appreciated because they sort of felt that they could come to us if they had any issues. We always made them feel that they were the most important person to us because this is life-changing for them, so they weren't just another client coming through the door.
I've wanted to pursue engineering for a long time, and if I've got half of my working life left, then I'd rather do that pursuing that sort of industry. And also, there's a huge pay difference in engineering compared to the hospitality market. New Futures have helped me gain the qualifications that I need, that the employers are currently looking for as mandatory skills, and that's opened up the opportunities for me to start working in an industry that I want to move to. New Futures didn't just help me with the courses, but they also looked at my CV. They also looked at the way that I look out for and try and make contact with prospective employers and gave me some really good advice.
Our approach to supporting participants was really having a clear understanding of the barriers that they faced, to providing a flexible and personalised approach to coaching, a commitment to bring partner organisations on board, and a flexible fund to pay for courses and equipment. I think that combination of flexible, high-quality training programmes with a flexible fund that helped fast-track people onto reskilling courses and ongoing career coaching, staying in close touch with people, building the confidence and providing in-work support was absolutely valuable. I think on the ground, the team has clearly witnessed 3 ways that Tees Valley New Futures has had an impact, and that's supporting individuals into meaningful employment, adding capacity to existing local programmes, and the lessons learned from this project will inform Tees Valley Combined Authority's employment and skills strategy. The pilot has shown why we need joined-up employment and skills system that enables people to adapt to the local labour market, make those changes, access new skills and reskill into jobs for priority growth sectors in the region.
Great, thank you for that. And we're going to move on to our last panel now, and we've talked a little bit throughout the course of today of how challenges and responses vary across the country, across the nations and regions of the UK. So we're going to have some different perspectives from different parts of the UK now. So can I ask my panelists to come up and join me and grab a seat on the stage? So we've got Brian Bell, who's the CEO of Fedcap Europe. We have Josh Miles, who's the Director for Wales at the Learning and Work Institute. We've got Shona Duncan, who's the Head of Business Solutions at the Tees Valley Combined Authority, and very possibly about to appear on screen. In fact, there we go. Excellent. It's all worked. Is Kathleen O'Hare, who's the Chair of the Northern Ireland Skills Council, joining us via Zoom. So, afternoon, everybody. We're going to ask you just to just say a few words for a few minutes about your perspectives, and then again we'll open it up and have plenty of time for questions and discussion. So I'll go on the order I can see, although I've got a screen to manage as well. So this is going to, I'm going to lose track now. But Josh, shall we start with you?
Yeah, of course, no problem at all. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on in Wales, some of the challenges we've got at the moment in terms of our labour market and skills, what's being done to tackle some of those challenges, and perhaps have a little look at what could change in the future. So just to set the scene a little bit then and tell you about what Wales looks like as a place. I'm sure lots of you have seen it on a map, but the population of Wales is quite small. It's about 3 million people, so not massive. That's about half the size of Scotland, but bigger than places like Estonia or Latvia. It's not a particularly population-dense place, so we don't tend to have big cities in Wales. The biggest one is Cardiff, which is not big in UK terms, and most people live either in sort of towns or rural communities. And also, we're not a particularly homogenous place, so there are lots of different communities with different types of economies. I've got a very thick Valleys accent, as you can probably hear. I come from quite a post-industrial community, but there are sort of seaside towns and rural areas too. So that has a big impact on policy. You'll know about the Welsh language as a key issue, so linguistic diversity is a thing for us, and that's particularly important for younger cohorts, with more and more younger people in Wales speaking Welsh. And that, again, has a knock-on impact on public policy. But the main thing we're here to discuss is around the economy, and Wales is quite often considered one of the poorer parts of the UK, or one of the poorer parts of Western Europe, you could say. And the reason for that is largely down to productivity. So Wales's productivity is generally about 72% of the UK average. So it's pretty poor. We're usually at the bottom of the league table. It's pretty depressing to see every year when the GVA stats come out. When you look at it per hour worked, it's about 83%, so a little bit closer. But that looks quite similar to perhaps Southern Europe, so Spain, Italy, those kind of countries, but quite far behind the UK average. Despite that, median wages in Wales are actually quite, well, they're a little bit better. They're not high, but they're better than the headline productivity suggests, at about 93% of the UK average. So that suggests we are relatively economically challenged, but despite that, Wales is actually wealthy in a lot of ways. So we're 5th in the UK in terms of median household wealth. So there's lots of money in Wales, it just isn't money that's coming in terms of income. And one of our big challenges, which is key for this discussion today, is economic inactivity. So historically, it's run at about 5% ahead of the UK average, and at the moment, that's a pressing gap. We're running at sort of 27, 28% of the population economically inactive. I mentioned wealth earlier on. A big part of that is down to our demographic change. So we have lots of young people that leave Wales, and usually they leave to go to university in England and they never come back, which is quite often a challenge. But what we do get lots of is people over the age of 50 retiring with good pensions and money to buy a property, which is where the wealth comes in, and they tend to retire to the picturesque and beautiful parts of Wales that we've got. So that causes lots of policy questions, as you can imagine. Two last things then to mention in terms of challenges. One is around PISA and our education system. There's a lot of challenges there at the moment, widely seen as underperforming, and there's a really damaging stat from the PISA, which is an OECD sort of classification, which I'm sure you're all aware of. But the performance of disadvantaged children in England is either above or similar to the average for all children in Wales. So we've got huge problems in terms of people leaving school at 16 and not quite having the essential skills that they need. And then that plays out into our skills system as well. So participation in post-16 education is pretty poor as well. We've got some of the lowest levels of young people with A-levels, and in particular, white working class boys are really rare in terms of attending higher education. So only 24%, which I think is the lowest of any cohort across the UK. So lots of challenges there, as you can imagine. What's been done about it that's good? Well, there's a mix of things. We've got a stable policy environment in terms of what's happening with Welsh government. More recently, there's been the creation of the Tertiary Commission for Education and Research. So this new body called MEDA is in charge of all of the post-compulsory education in Wales. So a big change in terms of how the funding and regulation of skills is going to happen, with a single body pulling everything together. We've also got lots of employment schemes that Welsh Government runs, so things like Work in Wales, which is a careers service for adults, and REACT, which is a programme that helps people facing redundancy that's been around for a number of years. So lots of stuff happening, but still overall quite significant challenges. What could happen in the future? Well, we've talked lots about the election today and the new government. There's quite a lot in there around further devolution, and in particular commitment to the devolution of all non-job centre employment support. So I think there's a great opportunity there for a policy environment that matches up employment support, skills, and as we've heard elsewhere, health, into something coherent in a Welsh context. So that's where I think the opportunity is going forward.
Great. Thank you, Josh. I was slightly worried when you were rattling off the depressing stats there, but we got to the optimistic vision of what we can do about this at the end. There's always optimism.
Yeah.
I'm going to move across to Kathleen next, if we can, if you can hear me and we can hear you okay. Kathleen, interested in your perspective on this and how things are in Northern Ireland.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me along to this conference. Sorry I can't attend in person. I'm actually on holidays in Scotland, so you may think there's a drinks reception waiting for you. There's one waiting for me in Scotland. So just to introduce what I'm actually, what my job is, I am chair of the Northern Ireland Skills Council, which was set up a year ago, and it was set up to bring sense to the fragmented different advice streams on skills. So basically we advise a minister. However, when I was appointed, we had no minister because devolved government had collapsed at that stage. So we only got a minister back earlier this year, and the advice from the Skills Council is now channeling through him. On the council, we have representatives from all walks of education, from business, from different government departments, because as we've heard today, collaboration is key. So I have the Deputy Permanent Secretary from Communities, Education and Economy also on the council. And we advise on the skills strategy for Northern Ireland. Now, we have some similarities with Wales. We're a small country. However, there's only 2.2% of people unemployed in Northern Ireland. We have a lot more men employed than women, and that causes a bit of concern because we need a childcare strategy to have women and carers back at work as well. Education, while it's quite good, we have a tail of underachievement, and we have 319,000 NEETs, people who are NEET, not in employment, education or training. Now that is the third highest in the UK after the North East and Wales as well. So that is a key concern. Like Wales, we lose about 5,000 students every year who go to UK universities. They love it. Liverpool, Manchester, different parts of the UK are full of students from Northern Ireland. By 2030, we expect that to be up to 10,000. We have a bias in Northern Ireland from parents who wish to have their sons and daughters go to university, and we don't value our further education colleges enough. And that's where we have a key issue, and one of the key issues that we have that we would like to see solved. There's a real mismatch between education and skills. And my advice, particularly to all the employers in the room currently, is education is far, far too important to leave it to educationists. We need to tie up those pathways towards skills. We need to value those pathways towards skills. In 1997, Tony Blair talked about 50% going to university. There needs to be a target set for people in skills, and not just on long-term courses in skills. We need part-time courses in skills as well. Northern Ireland shares a border with the Republic of Ireland, but it also shares a border with the EU. Our productivity is 40% below the Republic of Ireland. We have a recent report published called Do Managers Matter? And indeed they do, because the Republic of Ireland puts a lot more investment into the training of leaders and managers, particularly in SMEs. So we really need to work on that. We also need a number of cross-border policies at the minute, because a lot of our workforce lives on one side of the border, works on others, and companies operate from the two sides of the border. And current migration policy is actually adversely affecting that. Now, our difficulty in Northern Ireland is everybody in the room, you elect the government, we don't. Because our political parties are not, the main political parties. So with a huge majority, we don't really have the same influence. But we hope that the voices at Westminster who seem sympathetic to work on skills and to work on skills matter. And in 6 days, we see skills coming out as important, but currently we would like to see action in that. We would like to see similar initiatives like SkillNet, which happens in the Republic of Ireland, which is a regional and sectoral approach to skills. And we would like to see more collaboration in events like this, because to quite honest, this is the first time in a year I've been invited to a UK conference. So because I think we have so much to learn from each other.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. And I think that's a really helpful overview of some of the challenges, but also some of the things that are happening in Northern Ireland, and some of the kind of similarities but differences as well. And also, thank you for going a bit above and beyond and dialing in on your holiday. I hadn't realised that, so thank you for that. We'll continue down the line, if we may. So, Brian, across to you.
I've got some slides. Am I allowed to show?
Oh, yes. I think there's a clicker.
I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but I've got them either way. And I promise to be... I promised to be quick, didn't I? Because so I have got slides. That doesn't mean I'm going to take ages. It just means I've got some slides. So let's just go through them quickly. And I want to come at it from a slightly different angle, because I work for an organisation that delivers services to people who are either long-term unemployed or disabled or low skills or NEETs and so on. So, and I want to come at it from the angle of engagement, because I think engagement for me, from what I've heard today and thinking about today, is a critical thing. How do we engage people who find themselves long-term unemployed or isolated within the labour market, etc., in all of this that we've been talking about? And I saw this quote, because I like to think of things from the point of view of an individual, because some of these numbers that we see are huge, aren't they? But if you think of it from the point of view of an individual, but when you see a quote, I saw it in The Guardian, and you think, I wish I'd said that, because it really makes me think about the person, what's happening for a person. The other reason I like it, I could easily change that word health to skills or to employment, and it still works. The whole quote still works. So one day I'm going to pretend I said it and change the name at the bottom and my name. Let's just establish my credentials quickly for Scotland. I was asked to talk about Scotland. I've been delivering service in Scotland for 25 years, give or take. And lately, I've been working for Fedcap, delivering for about 5 years. And in that time, we've found work for 10,000 people in Scotland and delivered soft skills. I'll talk a little about soft skills in a minute. Either on courses or one-to-one or through online portals, etc., etc. We've delivered about 250,000 bits of training to people and work with 7,000 employers across Scotland. So my view on Scotland, and I could easily expand it out to the UK, because I've also worked delivering services for a 30-odd year in the UK. Not Northern Ireland, by the way. I did deliver stuff in the Republic for about 5 years, but not Northern Ireland. I could easily expand this out. And if I listen to all the numbers and look at all the graphs and all that, that's kind of what I think. That there's not enough people in work in Scotland. And I think the same if I just think across the UK. Now, there are bigger experts than me that would tell you what that means in terms of productivity and inflation, etc., etc. But I wonder if I could just pick on some of the numbers. The Resolution Foundation graphs showed some of this, but these are just some of the numbers of people in Scotland. We've got 100,000 people unemployed, 750,000 people economically inactive, 230,000 people on long-term sick. Of the people we see across the contracts that we deliver, about 50% have said that they've got a health condition. 75% of those say it's a mental health condition, and 25% of them have said it's got worse in the last year. I'll talk about the UK in a bit, but there was also some numbers thrown about the UK which are ingrained in a lot of people's minds, but it's the number of people on sickness benefits, long-term sick in the UK is 2.83 million people. And that number there, those numbers, I think we have to remember always, you talked about the size of Wales, Scotland's the same, it's about 5 million people. So those numbers are pretty significant numbers in a population of 5 million. And 2.83 million people across the UK is a worrying number, and over 9 million people who are economically inactive is an even bigger worrying number. Flip side in Scotland, those are the skills gaps that employers tell us. Hospitality care, green skills, I'll touch on in a minute, digital skills and soft skills. Most employers that we work with will tell us that give us people with good communication skills, ability to learn, problem-solving skills, we'll do the rest, is what they'll tend to say to us. I don't know if that's entirely true, but for a lot of people it is true. They want people who can come along and have the core skills to hold down a job effectively. So we tend to focus a lot on that. Here's Scotland's response to those numbers. Fair Start Scotland, which we deliver with, there's other organisations across Scotland deliver Fair Start Scotland. I'll mention No One Left Behind in a minute. And then the other two programmes on the right, left, as you're looking, the flexible work and individual training accounts are encouraging employers and individual people to learn. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about devolution, because Scotland's probably ahead of a lot of places in terms of devolution. 2016, I think, employability stuff was devolved to Scottish Government. What we've found is No One Left Behind is the latest initiative from Scotland, and what's happened is they've devolved again. So they've devolved from Scottish Government down to 32 local authorities. And I'm going to talk about devolution in a second because there's some attraction in that. We've talked about joining up services, and we've talked about focusing on local areas and local need and so on. But 32 local authorities for 5 million people becomes tricky for an organisation trying to deliver services. I don't know if you're that familiar with Scotland. It's probably like bits of Wales. You go up the north of Scotland, there's not a lot of people up there, and there's a local authority trying to cover, you could walk for miles and never see anybody, So it becomes quite tricky in that environment. And of those 32 local authorities, some of them are good at procuring, but not all. And it becomes problematic. So there's challenges for organisations trying to deliver services. And of course, the funding then gets diluted across those 32 local authorities as well. But No One Left Behind is the cornerstone of what Scottish Government are doing to address some of the numbers that we've talked about. And I think it's fair to say it's got off to a patchy start. And for me, in terms of what that means for devolution, so what about it? What about devolution? Is it the answer? There's some fantastic things coming out of devolution. I watched the video about Teesside before, and there's some amazing ways of joining up funding and amazing ways of delivering services for citizens within a particular area. I think for me, as a provider of services, we submitted some views on what good devolution could look like to the Select Committee recently. And what we wanted were high standards. Of course we do want high standards. We want all local authorities to be as good as the best in terms of procurement. And what that means is thinking ahead, building marketplaces, sharing co-design opportunities with providers. And that, at its best, that works brilliantly. At its worst, it doesn't. Sometimes there are legal challenges against procurement that didn't work out well. Sometimes things get delayed. Sometimes they get scrapped. So we want all local authorities who are going to get new procurement and commissioning powers all to be at the best. Same with funding. Sometimes we see funding pulled. Some of the things that are put up there, Fair Start Scotland, has now come to an end. So sometimes funding stability becomes a challenge. So what would be good when devolution really happens is, well, can we really start planning ahead? Because funding stability allows organisations to invest with local authorities, with procurement authorities, and be able to plan ahead ourselves. Ideally 5 years, that's why most government departments went to 5 years. So can we think ahead and have funding stability for 5 years? We've talked about scale a lot today. When funding gets fragmented down to 32 local authorities, question is, can you do things at scale? I'll just throw a number out there. Fair Start Scotland has worked with 70,000, bless you, 70,000 people, and Restart across the UK has had over 600,000 people on it. So it's that sort of scale that can we replicate that? And the important thing for me, I'm a big advocate of the Institute of Employability Professionals, is one of the reasons that organisations can be successful is ability to build careers for people who work for us, and the ability to keep people and develop their careers and give them good, well-paid jobs. So I think we need a phased approach to devolution and to keep on learning. I think if we suddenly move to devolve funding, I think we should be on a journey, would be my view. Let's go back to engagement quickly. I'll just quickly mention this. Fedcap are owned by our parent company is based in the US, and we brought over the Clubhouse idea from the US. And I'm going to just quickly mention, if I talk about engagement, good engagement means listening. So we've opened a Clubhouse in Staines. We're about to open another, just have opened another one in Brighton. I went in there 2 weeks ago and met Matt, who was a fella in there who had been a chef and was diagnosed with MS 6 years ago. He said to me, I really want to work, but I struggle. And he said, I am bored, skint, and depressed, and I really want a job. And I asked him what services he'd received in that 6 years he'd been diagnosed. He said, none. You're the first organisation that sat and listened to me. So we're on a journey with him to help him find work. And I just think what he said is that we're the first organisation who listened to him and acted on it and supported him in terms of trying to help him find the right job for him. And I think listening is a really important thing. So it's an innovation that we brought over from the US. And we're about to bring over another one, which is, we talked a bit, I went to the Green Giant thing, the growth in green jobs. So in the US, they have community colleges. So we're about to bring over some ideas from the US around community colleges and focusing on green skills and solar panel and heat pumps and all of that. And I heard that I'm pleased with thinking about that, because one of the things in listening to people, of course, what people say is, I want good, well-paid work. And it strikes me that is a big opportunity for a bunch of organisations in here to support people into good, well-paid work in the green skills environment. And then just one last plea from me while I stand here is that it's quite a journey, I think, to go down devolution. We're well down the way in some places, and some places do it really well. But just back to the theme of listening, it would be good to work in partnership with authorities and listen to each other about what we can each bring to this whole discussion about devolution. Because if we get it right, the opportunity is phenomenal for those 2.83 million people who are on sickness benefits and 9 million people who are economically inactive. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Brian. And last but not least, Shona, we saw the video there. We've enjoyed working with the Tees Valley Combined Authority. I don't think you were in the scuba gear or the submarine. I wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. But do you want to talk a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, of course. Thanks very much. And what's interesting is I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this and tell you about what some of the challenges are within the Tees Valley. My job title isn't by accident. I'm called Head of Business Solutions because we take the approach that this is about addressing the issues that businesses have in terms of job creation and making sure that we support local people to access those jobs. We take a much more demand-led approach to employment and skills support in the Tees Valley. I think the other thing to say is that Tees Valley is very similar to other areas. We've got high unemployment, high levels of youth unemployment. I could wax lyrical about all the negative statistics that we've heard about today so far. We've got a low skills population where many of our young people and our adults who have been long-term unemployed have no qualifications whatsoever. 8% of our working age population are in that description. And that means that we've got a significant challenge when we look at the number of jobs that we're creating. So taking that demand-led approach is actually quite challenging. In some ways, we're in a very fortunate position in terms of scale. So we've talked about being small. Tees Valley has 600,000 people in terms of a population, so incredibly small. But actually, that gives us an opportunity to work very closely and collaborate with our stakeholders and our local employers, local support agencies, and indeed access lots of local people in a very straightforward way because of the scale that we've got. Now, I think the opportunity we have in Tees Valley is that we unfortunately closed the SSI Steelworks in 2015, which unfortunately really devastated the employment situation within Tees Valley. However, sitting here today, it does give me an opportunity as having the biggest regeneration site in the country. And our aim is to create 20,000 jobs within that site. It's 7 square miles in terms of size, which you can imagine, well, actually, it's very difficult to imagine unless you visit, and I would encourage everyone to come and visit if you can. We're aiming to, as I say, create 20,000 jobs. We've already created 9,000 jobs and got a commitment from employers on that site to create those jobs. And we're working very closely with those employers to make sure that our local people can access those jobs, alongside making sure that our local businesses can be part of the supply chain of the Tier 1 contractors on that site. Huge opportunity in terms of net zero and clean energy. That's the real focus for the site. But making sure that our local people can access those jobs are our biggest challenge. If you think that most of the jobs are going to be at level 4 and above, so we're talking about 70% of those jobs being at that skill level, and yet we've got so many people with no qualifications and low levels of qualifications, how do we address the skills challenge within that? Well, part of it is devolution, but devolution is only part of the answer. I mean, the adult skills budget that we got devolved in 2019 is fantastic. It has made such a difference. We have increased the number of learners that are taking courses and achieving more qualifications. We've more than doubled the number of people that are going directly into work because of the training that they're taking. We've got more than 100% increase in terms of the number of employed people that are learning because we are funding that directly. And that's incredibly important when you think that the majority of the workforce of the future are probably in work now. And so how do we develop those people to make sure they that they access the opportunities that we create and progress into those higher skilled jobs, and make sure that we create a pipeline of talent for everyone within our local area. I think the other biggest challenge that we've got around all of that is that our businesses are still telling us they can't recruit, that they are struggling to recruit locally. Now, it's quite interesting, some of the debate we've had today, which has been, it started at the breakfast session for those of us that were here, around defining what the skills sector vacancies are and what those skills gaps are. But I think sometimes it's not just about skills, it's actually about work experience. Employers aren't just looking for qualified people, they're actually looking for experienced people that can actually do the practical skills on a day-to-day basis. When I take welders, pipe fitters, those are our biggest areas in terms of demand for new recruits. And unfortunately, our local employers cannot compete with the wages that are elsewhere within the rest of the country. So again, how do I make sure that we really work with our employers to make the case that our jobs are better jobs, good jobs, and really available for our local people when we're in that environment? I think for me, the biggest challenges we've got is about that experience. How do we get more people getting work experience? And that's one of my biggest asks for the new government, is how do we make work experience real and effective that will address business need? We've heard a lot about digital and technology skills today. How do we actually work with our local people, particularly young people, people in schools, pupils who are learning computer science, etc.? How do we make sure that the digital technical skills that they have are fit for industry needs in the future? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have. And it won't be people like me that will advise on that, I've got to say. But there are industry experts out there that we must get in front of our local people in the skills environment to pass on those industry level skills. And then there's job-specific skills. One of the things that we've really done with the devolved skills budget that we've had so far is looking at how do we create bespoke employer-led programs of learning. And we've got over 100 different programs in our bespoke learning programs at the moment. And what we're finding is that we've more than doubled the job outputs from those programs than in the past. Now that for me is a success. That's about getting local people skilled, accessing training that's fit for industry, and that employers are actually taking it seriously and working with us to make sure that that addresses their recruitment skills needs. I'm aware of time, and I think I'm probably getting a look. But basically, my biggest ask of government is to simplify the whole system, make sure that the funding system in particular is simplified. It's incredibly difficult for training providers at the moment. And, devolution of funding is one thing, but it's actually about how we influence what we do with that funding, and indeed how we influence even national funding. We are asking for much more incentivisation for businesses to increase the number of local people that they recruit, and thinking about how do we incentivise them to train more people. And there's not been a lot of conversation today about how we support our businesses to do that. And I would love another convention like this, where the majority of organisations in the room are private sector employers, and that we have a very real conversation about what can they do, what can we do, and what does the public purse actually need to pay for, because we don't and can't pay for everything in the skills agenda. Just in terms of devolution, I do believe in skills devolution. I do believe it needs to go a lot further. We've heard about widening it to employment and Department of Work and Pensions in particular, but I actually think it also needs to include the Department of Business and Trade, and making sure that there's more devolution of support to local businesses to create the opportunities for local people. Shall I stop there? I could go on.
You're standing between everyone in this room and a drink.
I realise that.
This is, and the impromptu drinks reception that's been organised in Scotland as well for Kathleen. We've got sort of a minute or two left. Does anyone want to ask the final question of the convention? Are you all ready for the networking reception? I think that's probably a yes, isn't it? I'm going to maybe draw us... no, in fact, I've got one... If you can all limit yourselves to one sentence answers, otherwise everyone in this room is going to get very upset. Is there a particular change that you'd like to see, or a particular thing that you're particularly optimistic about for the years ahead? Let's finish on a positive note. And Kathleen, if we can start with you.
Well, I'm positive because the government currently have a good relationship with most people, and it's a government that won't need to over-collaborate. I would like to see some inter-UK collaboration. I'd like to hear what Shona's doing, because something is very similar happening in Mid-Ulster with advanced manufacturing and engineering, and I think conference like this could be a good start for so much.
Fabulous. We've had 2 suggestions for the next convention already, so I hope the team are noting this down. One sentence each, please, if we could. We'll go down the line. Josh first.
Give me plenty of time to do the doom and gloom earlier, and you give me a minute to be optimistic. I think, just building on that last point, to be honest, the reset in relationships is going to be hugely important. We've seen quite competing agendas from Wales and Westminster in recent years, And I think the tone change is quite significant. It creates an opportunity to think afresh. So.
Fabulous. Thank you. Brian?
I'm extraordinarily excited about the next few years. And in the belief that good work is a good thing for people, I'm very excited by some of the noises coming from the Health Secretary already about looking at the impact of health on work and treating work as a way of helping people through their health conditions. I'm very excited by that and look forward to more coming out of that and joining in the debate.
Fabulous. Thank you. And Shona?
I think I'm looking forward most to the fact that this is going to be much more people-centred, and that means that that will address the supply-side opportunity that will complement the demand-led approach that we've taken within Tees Valley.
Brilliant. Okay, can I ask you to thank all of our panellists for their really insightful contributions?
Yep.